Welcome back to the Say What You Like Sports Podcast. The year is 2020, and there is not a lot to be thankful for in the 2020 year, but one thing that I'm holding on to is there's going to be an NFL season this year. What I really want to ask you, Eric, is what kind of season are we looking at during this pandemic for the NFL?
You know, it's going to be interesting. You see the successes in other sports like basketball, the NBA with their bubble, and you see, let's be honest, massive failures with baseball. I mean, they went a weekend before they had to cancel games and cancel series, people getting tested, you know.
It seems like I'm seeing an alert every other day.
Yeah. The Marlins and Cardinals were just fooling around over there. It's like 3, 9, 27 players COVID test, you know, and you just don't know what side the NFL is going to fall on. Are they going to be...
But let's be fair. The NFL's plan looks a lot more similar to MLB's plan than the NBA's. There's no bubble for the NFL.
There is no bubble. And maybe the fact that baseball kind of had to die for the sins of football.
Yeah.
And so, you know, players can see how bad this looks. I still don't understand how you're going to have a contact sport where if on a Tuesday practice, I mean, if you're practicing together. And I think the guys that are most susceptible is the offense and defensive lines. And to me, the worst is an offensive line, because if you lose a defensive player on your defensive line, the worst case is you get game planned against and you lose a game. If you lose an offensive lineman, or let's say your guard is sick on Tuesday and he gives COVID to your left tackle, your right tackle, and your center, and now those guys are out.
Yeah.
And now you're risking your star quarterback against maybe a healthy defensive line.
Your $35 million quarterback.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's big money out there. These owners have to be concerned. I think even fan bases have to be concerned with the health, not just in the short term, but the long term.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting on how because, you know, the other thing too is that you feel like football really hasn't told you what their plan is. They're just it's real kind of cut and dry.
Yeah.
You know, how secure are the hotels that these guys are going to be traveling to? How secure are the planes? How secure are the buses that get them to the planes?
They're on a trust system. And there's a whole hell of a lot of trust right now in the NFL. And COVID, though, it's affected a lot. I mean, it's already affected the NFL so much in the offseason. We want to talk about the draft, right?
Yes.
I mean, look, the draft was entirely just online.
Virtual, yeah.
Virtual draft. I mean, Roger Goodell and his multiple apparel suits that he was in, it was just...
I think by the 13th pick, he was tired because he was laying down at one point.
Yeah, you know, things like that. It's just affected so much. There's no OTAs.
None.
No mini camps.
Nope.
No preseason.
Nope.
Training camp has some weird scheduling where they can only put on pads a couple of times.
Yeah, it's the contact of it that they're worried about.
Right.
And I think, it's like about 2 weeks before, I think 3 weeks. And, you know, I heard Kyle Shanahan talk about it on a podcast with Chris Sims. Is like he doesn't like to use tackling in the drills, in like the live practices 7-on-7. You line up and you give him a thud and that's it. He goes, but the problem is that when there's no preseason, you don't know how your skill position players are going to react, especially rookies or running backs. Like, okay, if the play goes, you know, in a practice and like the linebacker kind of just nods him and then he walks off. You don't know if in reality in a game he's going to fumble. Is he going to bounce off of that? Is he going to be okay?
Yeah.
You have no... So
who has fumbling issues? Who wraps up? All those things.
That you don't get from, especially if you run the camps like him. And I know a lot of NFL coaches don't want to tackle because they don't want to injure their players.
Right.
Definitely don't want to take them to the ground. So you might have to change your installation of how you treat those practices now.
But that's where, like, your team, the 49ers, has an advantage, you know?
Yeah.
Their coach is returning. Their quarterback's returning. It shouldn't be that big of an issue as far as implementation of a system, of new plays. Whereas, look at, like, the Cowboys with Mike McCarthy. Like, that's a steeper hill, in my opinion. I mean, this is where COVID-19, the pandemic, really affects the team so much because this is all virtual meetings. And like you said... You know, maybe Dak understands the game plan, but we have not seen him execute it.
Yeah.
He's not going to get a preseason to knock the rust off.
No. And, you know, you can scheme stuff up and you can run your practices, but how many times do you run into in a game where they line up in a different defense?
Right.
Like, you know, you've been practicing with your own teammate. They're going to run this defense, and now you're running, let's say you run a 3-4. Now you're running a team that runs like a 5-2 or a 4-3 defense, and they give you looks that you're like, okay, now what does this play happen? You don't get the opportunity to like, I threw a pick, it's preseason.
Right.
Okay, I know when they do that, I know not to go there.
Right.
You know, the first time these guys are going to play, it's going to be regular season games. And I think that, you know, that's big.
We're going to see some sloppy.
You're going to see a lot of running the ball.
Yeah, I think so too.
And a lot of missed tackles, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because that form and that intensity is not going to be there the way it should be. So if you run the ball or you're kind of returning, and I mean, look at Dallas when we specifically talk about Dallas, you know they're not going to change their offense that much, not like they change coordinators.
Yeah.
I wonder on Dallas is how complex the defense is going to be. You know, going from, you know,
I think defenses are going to be pretty simple this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't think there's enough time. I don't think there's going to be enough time to develop cohesion between the players, the different position units, the coaching staffs, to get all on the same page and play some complex defense.
And what team do you think this hurts the most? If you could pick a team that this new training camp really is going to kind of hold back or kind of give a lot of issue to?
I mean, any team that has a new coaching staff, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, I think they're all in the same bubble. You have a new coaching staff. Think about somebody. Well, I will say this, especially if the coach is inexperienced.
Yeah.
That's going to be even tougher.
Because my mind goes to two teams. And that's Carolina and the Giants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because Carolina, you're getting a new quarterback in there too.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And they literally drafted their defense. I mean, going back to the draft, Carolina, I think, drafted all defensive players.
Yeah.
And so you have no idea what you're going to see, what it's going to be like. The coaches don't even know, you know? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I look at what it did in the draft again, going back to the draft, is like you saw a lot of coaches kind of just stick really close to their boards. You know, I mean, this is one of the mock drafts felt pretty chalk.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't risk it, you know? You really couldn't. I would say 30 of 32 teams kind of did the right thing for their team. I mean,
30 of 32 teams.
Two fan bases weren't exactly too happy.
Well, I know one's going to be the Packers.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the Eagles are still kind of heated over that.
I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
I mean, what for?
You look at Jalen Reagor versus some of the other players that they could have drafted, and it's one of those things that just it trips you out. And then when you look at everything as a whole, just the draft experience was different. You know, kind of going back to that was kind of, you know, you're seeing these GMs in their homes. You're seeing coaches in their homes.
Belichick and his dog.
The dog at the computer, breaking down, you know, defensive backs.
Yeah.
That dog is probably smarter than half the GMs in the league.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's probably going to get looked at in 2021.
Yeah, Jets' new GM.
Yeah, for reals.
But, you know, you look at everything that did, and you feel for kind of like the players, because, you know, a guy like Burrow and Chase Young, who didn't get their opportunity to go.
Yeah.
I mean, we had talked about, because it was going to be in Vegas, you know, and we live in Southern California, being able to a little short trip over there to go and enjoy that. You wonder how that kind of affects them, how it affects contracts. COVID really did just turn the NFL inside out.
Yeah, it totally did. And with all that being said, what would you say is the over-under on the NFL running a completely full, uninterrupted season?
I would put it at like 25%.
25%.
Yeah, because you just, like you said at the beginning, their model is closest to baseball, and you see that baseball is just having issues left and right. The only reason baseball is still even like is continuing right now is because they have so many games. They play multiple times a week. So yeah, they missed that 3 games at the beginning of the week. They may be able to catch up the following week at the end of the week and play those 3 games again, that series. Whereas football, man, if you're screwed by Tuesday, that game's over. Like I said, if somebody, like I said, the scenario, your offensive line is sick. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to have backups, but you couldn't have backups on the field because you would have to keep them quarantined and preserved. It means they haven't played. They don't have the practice.
Yeah.
You know? Every other position aside from linemen, because I think that is where everything else is simply wins or losses. If Dak gets COVID or Jimmy gets COVID, okay, they got the backup. Yeah, it's going to suck and we might lose, but I'd rather have that than you not have, you know, Tyron Smith
and
Zach Martin and somebody comes in and knocks Dak's head off because we didn't have the right offense. Now he's concussed or he's hurt.
Right.
Injuries to those players,
Yeah.
I think is where I look at it. And because, you hear that, COVID affects, high body mass, and offensive linemen are bigger guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you see some of the guys already dropping out, and you really can't blame them.
Yeah. No, I was reading some tweets earlier from Tom Pelissero, and they're talking about now if a player opts out of the 2020 season, their cap hit is completely erased. Not just the actual base salary, but any guaranteed money, any proration that applies to that year is completely wiped out against the cap. I mean, that's a big implication. Yeah. I mean, we'd never heard of this.
No.
Where the cap's it's a wash.
It's a wash, yeah. I mean, speaking of the cap, I mean, a lot of teams, they bet their horses, they tied their horses to an increased cap with the TV deals. And I think they said that while they were able to keep it from going really down, they've kept it to stay at about $175 million, I think the cap's going to be. I was reading, I'd have to follow up on this one, but I heard like the Eagles, based on that cap number for 2021, the Eagles and like the Saints would be like in the negative, but like in millions in the negative.
Really?
Like they would really be hurting for that. Because they said, okay, well, we're going to put all this money here. So now what do? I know that the Niners kind of have that running issue because you have D Ford and Quan Alexander who are set to get big numbers next year, and you still have to pay George Kittle. And if you want to keep Trent Williams, you're going to have to keep Trent Williams. So you're going to have to really, John Lynch talked about, you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to the truth of the matter is you're going to have to let some guys go. So talented team players because, it wasn't handled right or, you bet on the wrong horse. And, I mean, like I said, it took a pandemic and something we haven't seen like 100 years for the NFL to finally, but, at the end of the day.
It might help the NFL's middle class, though. Because let's be honest, the NFL's middle class is shrinking. It's the top guys and the near league minimum, veteran minimum guys. Yeah. There's very little in between. Yeah. So maybe this might help.
Yeah, that's true.
Some way.
You kind of hope it does. You're trying to see a positive in it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see that small positive in the pandemic where, hey, maybe it helps to get a couple of guys on, those solid starters, maybe a little bit more solid pay. Yeah. Because that's really not been the case for the last, 10 years?
Yeah, you see that gap. Yeah. I mean, you got Mahomes, though.
Mahomes money.
That's just like...
And yeah.
I heard he bought... I don't know, did you hear this? I know he bought a stake of, like, the Royals.
Yeah. Isn't he part owner of the Kansas City?
Well, when you make $45 million
big things, man, in Kansas City. I mean, he owns Kansas City. Yeah. Basically.
He used to have that running joke that Pacquiao ruled the Philippines. Like, he was the king of the Philippines. Right. Like, Kansas City, if it ever broke off into its own country, Mahomes would be its king.
Oh, yeah. Mahomes is the president. Yeah. Right away.
Ruler of that.
Ruler, for sure.
No, I was going to ask you, what percentage do you put a regular season finishing up at?
I'm not far from you. I'm thinking anywhere from 25 to 30%. That's exactly what I was going to say. Because I think the risk is just too high. I think unless you're playing in a bubble, and let's just face it, NFL is the contact sport of contact sports. There's no getting around it. These guys are going to go heads. These guys are going to be in each other's faces. These guys are going to be sweating all over one another. Bleeding. Yeah. Breathing. Everything. It's a gladiator type sport. Yeah. Gladiators, I don't think they could handle it in the and I don't know. I don't see how the NFL does it without a little bit more of a stricter plan.
Yeah. They're going to need a little bit of dumb luck too at this point.
That too.
But all we can do is hope. Like I said, I think if I can get to 12 games, I'll call it a win. Like, if we could get to, like, December and there was still football, I'd be like, all right, cool. If anything, if it ended at 12th game and they said, nope, we're done, I'd be cool. Because at the end of the day, anything over, because that at least gets you through the end of the year. And you got football at the end of the year. Yeah. And what you do is you hope that, on a national thing that everybody kind of gets, like, accustomed to this. And, the NFL is better equipped in 2021 if we're still dealing with certain parts of COVID, which, we don't know yet. Right. That they've mandated it better. Maybe, the country has gotten a vaccine or, we've managed it a little bit better. But I think so long as there's COVID and that it's this issue, I can't see it going away for athletes. Yeah. Because they're playing in such a contact. Yeah. I mean, even like in boxing or MMA, it's two people. Right. It's two people. This is 12 to 22. is practicing.
Easily.
Coaches, we didn't even tell you. Doug Peterson tested positive for COVID. He was asymptomatic, tested positive. He gives that to one of his linemen, coaching them up a technique. He gives it to Wentz, explaining something to Wentz.
Right.
Boom. There goes the Eagles.
Right. It's just, I just think the NFL season is just way too fragile to have that high of an outlook to think it's going to go from beginning to end.
Yeah.
But I do have one parting shot on this podcast. One idea I want to pitch out there. Punt, pass, and kick. What if the NFL season, they just can't play games? We cannot play 11 on 11. Wouldn't it be cool to, get smaller groups of players, maybe divide them by position? I was talking about maybe dividing them by, like, punter week. And it's a punting competition. You can get all the starting punters in the league and have them do punting drills for points and have a championship. You can have a passing drills where you can get every quarterback in the league quarantined 2 weeks ahead of time, passing their tests, in one location, and then they go out on one NFL field somewhere, and they have a competition as far as who can launch the ball, farthest down the field, whatever. Wouldn't that be interesting?
I think so. I think if they end up with like the MLB issue, we're 2 weeks in, like we're by week 3 and half the rosters are decimated by COVID. At this point, whatever players you have, I would be down to watch. You take 32 punters and over, 2 days, you could do a little tournament Saturday and Sunday. Like you said,
right.
You quarantine them for the week, make sure they're good. And they can do distance, running, punting, like 10 yards. And you get the king. Like you do a home run derby, but for every skill position.
Isn't the MLB All-Star competition, isn't that like one of the best things to watch? Yeah. It could be something like that. Something we haven't seen as NFL fans for a long time.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about those old tests. It would be like those old quarterback drills.
Yeah.
It was like Young and Favre and Aikman.
Right. Elway, all those guys would get out there.
Marino.
Who could throw on the run, who could hit the moving targets.
Yeah.
Things like that. That would be cool. I mean, if we have to eliminate 11 on 11 competition, why not move to a little bit closer to 1-on-1?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. And that's something that we can still root for our guys. Yeah. We could still have that home, that home team.
Yeah. And let's be honest, that would be the only sport on by that time. Because, sooner or later, like even if baseball kind of finishes out, their 60-game season, they'll be done in 2 months.
Yeah.
Basketball's, I don't think they're 2 months too. They've only got a few months before they're done. Right. So the question begs, what do you do for October, November, and December? Yeah. And I think that if it looks bad, I would say do that. You have fun with it. Make it. Goes to COVID charities. And people will consume. Hell, we watched the draft, which is basically them picking players. That's literally what the draft is. Reading names off a list. Yes, I would watch Jimmy Garoppolo try to freaking beat, Russell Wilson in a freaking, quarterback competition, or, to see Richard Sherman versus Amari Cooper. Maybe they do like a little one-on-one DBs versus receivers.
Bragging rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun for the fan bases, the fans. I think that's one way to keep the fans' interest if this should go the wrong way in 2020.
I mean, anything's possible now. This is 2020.